The following is an AZPM original production.
Arizona Science is supported by Research Corporation for Science Advancement.
For Arizona Public Media, I'm Tim Swindle, Professor Emeritus of Planetary Science at the University of Arizona, and this is Arizona Science. Joining me today is Mike Worobey, the head of the Department of Ecology and Evolutionary Biology at the University of Arizona. Welcome back, Mike.
Thank you so much to have me back. It's great to see you, great to be with you.
Mike, you've been in the news again fairly recently, still pursuing the origin of COVID-19. What's the latest?
The latest is a pretty amazing look into what was present at this market called the Huanan Seafood Market. And it turns out a whole lot more than just seafood was being sold at that market. So my colleagues and I, since early 2020, have published a series of papers trying to figure out where did this virus actually come from? How did it get into humans? I've been quite open to the ideas that, it may have been a so-called natural jump, but it may have been something that escaped from a lab. And so I've spent many years now just essentially trying to rule out certain hypotheses. So I've tried to rule out the idea that it came from this market. But over time, the evidence just keeps pointing more and more strongly to that hypothesis and away from other hypotheses.
You mentioned one of the other possibilities is there was a leak from a lab, which would be embarrassing for the Chinese government. Is it possible that they somehow fudged the data that they gave you?
Most of the crucial data that has sort of shown the likely scenario here, interestingly, was produced quite a long time before the shift in stance of Chinese authorities to kind of say, wherever it came from, it didn't come from China. And so Chinese authorities, they don't like the idea that people might think it came from China, either from a lab incident or from this market origin hypothesis. In some ways, it's more embarrassing for China, who experienced the first SARS outbreak and then put in motion and funded, billions of dollars of infrastructure to try to prevent that exact scenario from happening again.
You've done research on things like the 1918 flu and the origin of HIV before COVID-19 came around. Do you think you'll get back to topics like that, or do you think you and your group will be working on COVID-19 for the foreseeable future?
Since COVID-19 emerged, we actually have worked on now Mpox, this what used to be called monkeypox. So my colleagues and I were able to show that virus that emerged in spring of 2022 outside of sub-Saharan Africa, that lineage had actually been circulating cryptically in humans in Nigeria for years and years before. We were also kind of early on the case with this new avian flu, H5N1, that's jumped into cattle in the U.S., and so our team, when the USDA shared a big repository of their sort of what we call these raw sequence reads, we stitched them into the sort of longer sequences that you need to do these analyses. And it was actually me on Twitter who was the first in the country to look at the data and publicly reveal that this was not something that was just jumping in from birds to cattle over and over again, sort of recently, in March or April. This was actually just one outbreak, and you could see that it had started probably in November of last year. We were able to show that, in many ways, the cat was already out of the bag and that we were going to have a real difficult time managing this.
Our guest today has been Mike Worobey, an expert on the genetics of viruses, who's been studying the origin of COVID-19, among other things. This is Tim Swindle, and you have been listening to Arizona Science. You can also listen to this and other Arizona Science segments by going to the AZPM website azpm.org.
Thank you to Research Corporation for Science Advancement for their support of Arizona Science. AZPM podcasts are made possible in part by donations from listeners like you. Learn more at support.azpm.org. Thank you.